Welcome everybody, my name is Bills and this is going to be a tutorial in Godot 4.3 on how to build a basic platformer. The whole point of this series is I'm not going to be showing you step by step how to do everything my way. Rather, I'm going to show you code obviously because you need code, but rather I want to discuss the why behind we do certain things, how we do them, and help you develop a mindset of how to approach your own coding problems so that you can be an independent coder and game developer on yourself. So we're going to start this project from scratch. We're going to create a new project. We're just going to call it YouTube Platformer. Perfect. We're going to create an edit. And it always opens up for me in the other window. So I'll move that over here. And then I don't know if you have editor features. I always do this, what I'm doing right now, and I just take off the 3D editor because then I don't see it. I'm here in the scripts because I'm not going to use 3D at all. Alrighty. So this is the basic Godot scene right here, and this is what we have when we boot up. Right down here is our file system. So this shows all of our files for our project. These are our nodes. This is the current scene we're working on, and then any node or scene properties will appear over here. So I'm going to jump over. I've got my files open over here with everything we're going to need. Alrighty, so first thing we're going to do is I'm going to create some folders. This first one is called Entity. I always put my player and stuff in there. Then I'm going to do a world one, which is where I put world related things, and then resources, and that's where I put all my artwork. So the resources we are going to use, everything is like an asset I have made except for one. It is a character base from itch.io, which is the platformer character project. And it is on itch.io. It is made by a user named 413 Games. I will link it in the description so you can go pick that up for yourselves. The rest of the assets, the background and the tile set, are mine, and as well as the icon for the project, which we're going to get rid of that icon in a second. So we have a background that I am importing into resources. We have the character base resource. We've got a tile set, and then the icon I'm actually going to just put in this main folder so it appears down here. I'm going to delete this icon, and this icon isn't critical by any means. It's just I like to change the icon so when it shows up in your bar down below we can see the project and whatnot. So first thing we're going to want to do is open up our project settings here and select advanced settings. Now I'm going to go down to run. We don't have a main scene yet. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set max FPS to 60. You can change that to a different number if you want, but setting a max FPS will allow you to avoid any like tearing or jittering of your images while changing different refresh rates of monitors. So then we're going to go to our window, and our viewport is going to be quite small. We're going to do 320 by 180. And then your window override is going to be much bigger. I generally try to do about 3 to 4 times what this is, depending on your display resolution. And then we're going to come down here and we're going to go to viewport for stretch mode and keep aspect ratio. Perfect. And then we're going to put a boot splash on, which is that image, our icon. And then we're going to come down to rendering textures, and we're going to go to nearest. So this will allow us to make pixel perfect rendering on our project. Alrighty. Next up is our input map. And so this is where all of our inputs are. The way input works in Godot is it just gives us a list of inputs that we define, and then we can call those inputs whatever we want. So they have built-in ones, which are all like UI, and there's like a ton of them. You can use those. I don't like to. I like to define my own, and I define mine by kind of like the key. So I say like key up for the up arrow key, key down. We're going to do key left. We're going to do key right. And then we're going to do key jump. And so these are the keys we're going to use for control. So these are just the action, like the name of it. We have to come over here to this plus sign now. And on this plus sign, we can click to define the actual key. So you can do like joypad axis, so controller support, the buttons on a controller, the mouse, or the keyboard keys. And the nice thing is I can just hit the up arrow and it'll pull it up right there. And then we just hit OK. And for down, we hit down arrow. For left, we hit left arrow. For right, we hit right arrow. And then for key jump, you can hit space or X. I generally use X for jump, so I'm actually going to switch this over to X. The reason I use X is in a lot of games that I code, you have other actions besides just jumping, like shooting or dodging or climbing. And so X, Z, and C are the three keys I generally use. So feel free to change that to spacebar if you want, but that's how I tend to do it. Alrighty. So there we have it. We have all of those things set up. And now we can actually get into our actual game and everything we do. So this right here is kind of like the scene editor. We don't have a current scene that we're doing, so we're going to create a scene, a node 2D, and we're just going to call it world, is generally what I call it. And now if we hit run, we need to choose like a main scene, and this is the first scene that the application goes to. So I'm going to hit select current, and we're just going to save it down here as the base. Now, I like to save with capital letters. I know Godot generally tells you to do lowercase, but I do capital. And then did you see that boot splash come up? So that boot splash did not look very good because it wasn't set to the actual like dimensions of the it's a square, and I was trying to render a square on a rectangle, so it didn't work out too well. There it is. There's icon. So now we're going to select that icon, close. So now when we run, you won't see it, but like up here, it has that icon, and down in my window, it has that icon. So nothing appears in this scene because this scene right here is empty. If we want, we can drag our icon out here, which is absolutely massive. So I'm going to come over to the scale right here, and I'm going to do 0.25, scale it down. And now if I center this on the world, so up here I'm going to turn on grid snapping. I'll zoom in. And right now it's centered on the world, so let's run it. But we only see it up here in the corner. And the reason for that is this blue outline is our viewport. So this is what we'll see. So if I drag this down here now, it should be in the center of our screen with some absolutely horrendous resizing right there, because we went down a corner. We didn't go down by like a whole number. If we made it, if we just did half, that'll probably look better. Let's try that. Yeah, see, much better. Still some weird tearing going on. We might need to make some adjustments with some of our settings. Anyway, so this is our world right here. So I'm going to delete this. And notice how when I drag this out, it automatically added a node of type Sprite 2D, because that's what this would be. This would be a Sprite 2D. So it automatically added that node. All right, so we are actually going to create a whole new scene. So we're going to go down here into Entity and hit Create New Scene. We're going to call this one Player. It's going to inherit from a 2D scene. And so what these are is everything in Godot is a node. It's just whatever it is in the game, they call it a node. Node is the overarching everything inherits from node. And then there's kind of three types. There's a user interface, which is all GUI elements. It can be used for GUI of a game. You can build a whole application that has nothing to do with video games. In fact, the whole Godot editor was built out of like these nodes and scenes. 3D is for 3D, and 2D is for 2D. And since our player is a 2D node, we're going to create a player scene. And so now there's nothing that's going to happen. So like if we hit this right here, this will run our current scene. Nothing will happen because there's nothing in this scene. So for a player, we need a few basic things. Actually, I just realized that we have a fatal flaw here. This does not come from 2D scene. This needs to come from kinematic. Nope, that's not what's called. Character body 2D. All right, so our player is a character body 2D, and a character body 2D is a type of 2D node, but it allows you to use physics. So it's a movable physics object, often that's controlled by the user, aka player. However, we have this little warning right here, and if we hover, it says this node has no shape, so it can't collide with other objects. Consider adding a collision shape 2D. So let's go ahead and add a collision shape 2D. And I'm going to rename this to call it Collider, because that'll be our collider. And now nothing is appearing here in our player center, but if we come over to this collision shape 2D, this inspector shows all of the properties. So this is a node because everything has node properties. It has node 2D properties, which allows us to apply transformations, so positions, rotations, scales. And then it has a collision shape. So we're going to choose a new rectangle shape. And now there is the collider for our character. I'm just going to snap it to that right there. We can mess with some settings so we can disable it so it doesn't see collisions. We can do one-way collisions and define which way, which direction the one-way is. And then this is the debug color. Debug color is important because if we go to debug and click on this visible collision shapes, when we run the game, we can see all the collision shapes, and it's very useful for debugging. So now our character is going to need a sprite. So we're going to click Sprite 2D. So that's a two-dimensional sprite. We're going to rename it Sprite. And then I'm actually going to put this first because whatever is on the bottom of these children is rendered last or on top. So I want the collider to render on top of the sprite. So if we look at our sprite properties, it has a texture, an offset, an animation, and a region. So this is for, saying, hey, I just want to see this rectangle within the whole sprite. Animation is how many horizontal frames there are, vertical frames, which frame we're looking at, or the coordinates of the frame. And offset is just offset of the image, and we have options to flip horizontal and vertical. So let's grab our character base, and we're going to grab it and drag it right here, and there we have it. But this is a sprite sheet, so we see all the animations. And if we count, we have 6 horizontal and 7 vertical frames. So if we go over here and we change these frame numbers, Now we have just our character, and we can cycle through all of the animations until we get back to the very beginning. And now we can click on our collider and we can drag it and we can snap it. However, we're going to change the snap features. Configure snap. There you go. Grid step 8 pixels. We want this to be 1 pixel. Hit OK and turn snap back on. There we go. So now I'm going to drag our collider to about this size, and that will be the collider for our player. So now if I run the current scene, we see our character, and once again, he's up in the top left because this blue would be our viewport. Let me turn that off. This blue would be our viewport, and he's up here in the top left. But if we go back to our world, we can now add our player scene as a node, a child of our world, and we can move him and put him there. So now if we run the whole entire game, we should see the character relatively in the middle of the screen like we do right now. And so Godot is built like this. It's called composition, or like an entity component system. So we have a character body and we add components to it. We add a sprite so it has an image, a collider so it can collide. In the world, our level, we can call it, we add a player so the player is in the level. So let's add now an animation for this. So there's 2 or 3 kind of things you can use. You can use animated sprite 2D, but I always like to use animation player because it has a lot more power behind it. And I always call it animator. So now with our animator, we can click on animation to come to our animation panel, and we see that we have no animations. So we click new animation, and we'll call this idle. And the way this works is we keyframe what exactly is going on, how long the animation is, if it repeats or is a one shot, meaning it just plays once. So we want this to repeat. And we add tracks. Tracks allow us to keyframe certain properties. So we're going to add a property track. And what do we want to keyframe? Well, we want to keyframe which frame of our sprite is showing. So we click on our sprite, we click on frame, and we open it. And now I'm going to zoom in and change my snap to 0.01. And now we're going to click on our sprite, and we're going to go to this frame property, and we're going to click this to keyframe it. And then we move forward to 0.1, and we keyframe the next to 0.2. Nope, that did not work. So this needs to be value 1. So we go to 0.2 sprite. Now we're on 2, keyframe. We go to 3, keyframe. We go to 4. Keyframe. We go to 5. Keyframe. And we go to 6. And there we go. So that's the end of our animation. And now I'm going to change our animation length to 0.6 so that it matches the length of this. And now if I hit play, we see our character is animating. Now that's pretty fast for an idle, so I actually want to double this time. So I'm going to switch this to 1.2, and I'm just going to drag these frames to be every 0.2 seconds. And we can change if we wanted. We can come down here, change our snap to 0.2, and now it'll only let us snap every 0.2. Or we could do to just, or 0.02. We could change it to just 0.2 to snap it 0, 0.2, etc. So now if we hit play, we've got our idle animation. So let's add in another animation. We're going to call this one run. And same thing, we're going to go to our property track, click on the sprite, and there's other things that we can also animate. We can animate position, rotation, scale, if it's visible, its mask, its Z index, its flip H or flip V. All of these are properties that we can keyframe, and this allows us to create incredibly powerful animations. All right, so our run animation, we're going to go to Sprite, we're going to cycle through, and we're going to keyframe all of these real quick. So those are all keyframes now, and we're going to probably want this to be 0.6 seconds. That one will go at 0. Next one goes at 0.1, and then 0.2, 0.3, goes to 0.5, and 0.4 loop, and let's play it. That looks pretty good. He's running. I like it. Alrighty. Now we're going to do jump as our next one. Add our property track, sprite, frame. Click on our sprite. Go to our jump animation. And this one's just a single sprite. So we click jump, and then we do the same thing, and we call it fall. And there we have it. All of our animations are now set and ready to go. So let's save our scene. Now that we have all of our animations set, we're going to see this is going to disappear because our frame over here is it was on an empty frame, but now we're on frame 0, so our character will be there. And if we run the scene, nothing's going to happen because our character is still up there, and he won't animate because there's no reason for him to animate. So the next thing we have to do is to actually get this character up and ready to go. And the way we do that in Godot is by attaching scripts. And we can attach a script to any node, but this script we want to attach to our player. So we're going to call it player.gd because we will be using the Godot script language. We hit create, and it's going to bring up our Godot script, which in this case it didn't because I need to change a setting. Text editor, external, use external. I do not want to use an external code editor. I want to use the internal one. Alrighty, so this is the automated code that it generates for. So this is the external, or this is the automated code that it generates for our character body 2D. Now, GD script is written in what is called snake case. So that's word underscore, all in lowercase. I'm just going to say right now, I absolutely loathe snake case. I hate it so much. So I do not code in snake case. It doesn't follow the GD script syntax. You can hate me for that all you want. You're not going to change my mind though, because I absolutely hate that case. Anyways, moving on. Another setting I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to check scroll past end of file so I can scroll down further. I always like that. So this script is extending character body 2D, which basically means it's inheriting all of the code that is associated with the character body 2D. We set up a constant for speed and for our jump velocity. And then we have a function. There's a few default functions in Godot that are denoted by this little blue thing. This means this is like one of their built-in functions, and this is called physics process. Another one that you'll see quite often is underscore ready. And I'm just going to send it to pass, which is basically saying don't do anything. Because there's no brackets, this is a tab delimited, I think is what that's called, which means a tab is how we indent. We don't use open brackets and close brackets, we indent. And this semicolon means like, hey, we're expecting a like indent here. So this whole function is on the indent. So we're going to start by doing setting up a bunch of variables. So I'm going to do region player variables, and these region tags just allow us to have code that we can open and close. So first thing I'm going to do is I want to be able to access these nodes, so our sprite, our collider, and our animator. The way we do that in Godot is there's a few ways, but the way I prefer to is adding the onReady keyword, which means automatically get it instead of putting this code down here in the ready function, a variable called sprite, and then we write a $, and then the name of the node, so sprite right here. So we're going to do this for all 3 of those nodes. This will be our collider, and then there we go. So now I'm going to define some physics variables that we're going to use for a player. These will be constants. So constant run speed, and that is going to equal 150. Our acceleration is going to equal 40. Our gravity is going to equal 300. Our jump velocity is going to equal negative 150, because in Godot, negative is up, positive is down. And then the max number of jumps our character is allowed to have is 1. Switch that to a lowercase a. So those are some constants. And to get rid of all of these, I'm going to just do that for now. So next up, our actual move speed. So in the way I do things, so any word that is all caps, like it starts with a cap, that's a constant. If it's a lowercase, so like lower camel case, so lowercase first and then uppercase, that's a variable. That means that value can change. So we're setting our move speed, which is the current speed we're going to move at, to the run speed. And the reason we're doing this is because if we want different speeds, then we just have the constants and we just assign them to move speed, and the player will just move at that speed. It'll make more sense in a second if you haven't programmed like this before. I will go fix that in a second. Okay. So move direction is going to be used to see which way our input direction is. If it's in the x-axis, it's just going to be in the x-axis. So I'm actually going to throw an x right there. Move direction x. Jumps is the current number of jumps that the character has performed. And then facing is a variable that we use to determine which way the player should face based on key inputs. And we use that to flip the sprite. So now I also like to have my input variables. So I'm going to cycle through all of our keys, set them all to false. And then key jump is actually going to have 2, because I want to know if it's held or pressed. So pressed will be like it's just been pressed and we only register that it's been clicked once, whereas key jump will measure if it's still down and being held. Alrighty, and with that, we can end the region. And so now that allows us to code fold all of these variables. And then I just put a space right here. So like these are the player's constants, and then these are like the changing variables. So we're not going to do anything in our ready function. And we're actually going to skip past our physics process real quick because I try to keep these functions to a bare minimum and then just write other functions that have logic below them. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get all of our input states. So we're going to say key up is equal to, and then we say input, which is Godot's input, is action pressed, and then we put a string of the action name. And these are the ones that we have defined in our project settings input map. See, key up, key down, key left, key right, key jump, and then all of the built-in UI ones will also be present when we do this. So now we're going to say key down equals input.is action pressed, and then key down. And this one actually here should be key up. And so I'm going to just copy this line right here. I'm going to say key left equals, and then we'll switch this to key left. We'll do the same thing for key right. And we do this for key jump as well. Is action pressed, key jump. And then the last one we're going to do is key jump pressed equals input.is action just pressed. And so just pressed is going to register just once. It won't send a constant signal. It'll register just that once, and then it'll be good. And then last thing we're going to do is down here, we're going to say if key right facing equals 1, and then if key left facing equals -1. And so that's how you write like an if statement on one line. You still need that semicolon in there. And so that's all of our inputs. So now up here in our physics process, we're going to first get our input states. And we'll call this function get input states. Perfect. The next function that we're going to want to do is horizontal movement, is we want to get all of the horizontal movement for our character. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to set move direction is equal to input.get axis. And we're going to do move, oopsies, move left. There we go. I can code, don't worry. Move right. And these should be key. Key left, key right. There we go. So what this function does is it basically gives us the combination of these two. And it is not liking us for some reason. Move direction. So that means up here we've got this spelled wrong. Move direction X, that's right. We put it in move direction X. So basically what this says is key right will return, if we hit just key right and not key left, it'll return a +1. If we hit key left and not key right, it returns a -1. And if we hit both, we get a return of -1 plus +1, which equals out to 0. So if we hit both left and right, our player will stand still and nothing will happen. And now what we do is we simply take the player's velocity, and this is a built-in property that comes from the extending character body 2D. And we're going to say move toward, and so we're going to move our velocity variable, and we're going to move it in the direction of move direction X times move speed, and we're going to move it by a factor of our acceleration. So what this does is it's going to move this variable until it reaches this value by this increment. So let's actually run our script now. And now we can see that nothing happens because we haven't actually called our function here. So handle horizontal movement, and now we call the horizontal movement function, and now if we run it, we should be able to move left and right. Yep. So our character moves left and right. Now it's going to seem very choppy at first, just because there's nothing going on. There's no animation or anything. And we can actually add in some animation right now. So let's do another function that's going to handle our animation. So function handle animation. What we're going to do is first we're going to flip the sprite. So we say sprite. So this is accessing our sprite 2D node dot flip h, a built-in property, whether or not we should flip the horizontal value. And we set it to equal facing is less than 0. And I correct that. So what this will do, this is a condition. So if facing is less than 0, meaning we're going left, then it's going to return true, as in yes, we should flip the horizontal value. But if not, it returns false. So now if we run our game, remember facing is set. It's not going to do anything because once again, I did not call handle animation. So now our character will flip left and right depending on the arrow keys. Because remember, we set facing in our get input states right here. So now let's actually do the animation. So we're going to say if is on floor. So this is a built-in property that returns if the player is currently colliding with a floor. And so if we're on the floor, we need to see if we are moving or not. So if velocity dot x is not equal to 0, so if we are moving, then we're going to say animator, which is our animation player node, dot play, and we're going to pass in the run animation. And then we're going to say else, meaning we are not moving, animator dot play, and we're going to play our idle animation. And then if we're not on the floor, we say else with a K. Now we're going to check if our velocity.y is less than 0. So remember, less than 0 means we are moving up, so jumping. We're going to say animator.play, and we're going to play our jump animation. And then if not, we're falling. So we are going to play our fall animation. Perfect. So now the player should run left and right, except for it's not, because we're not actually on the ground. So because we're not on the ground, because there's no vertical collision below us, the player is actually falling. So what we can do is let's just take all of this, and we're going to hit Control K, and that'll just comment that out. And we hit play, and now the player is here, and the player is not running. So why is the player not playing? It's because we're still triggering if is on floor. So yeah, so actually commenting out this is not going to do anything because it's this initial condition that we need to check. So before we can fully check this, let's finish up our player. So up here, we're going to do handle gravity. And this is actually like the one bit of code that I usually put in here. We can throw in a function called the handle gravity. And we're going to say if not is on floor. So if we're not on the floor, then we're going to say velocity.y plus equals our gravity times delta. So times delta. Delta is the amount of time that has passed since like the last cycle. And it's a way of just kind of evening everything out to make sure that no matter what our FPS is, we're adding by the same increment. And then what we're going to say is else, we're going to say jumps equals 0. So if we're not on the floor, add gravity, meaning make the player fall. But if we are on the floor, then reset our jump count to 0. You know what? I'm actually going to throw this into a function because that'll just make everything consistent and pretty. That's if I can type. And so we need to pass in delta here, which means we're not going to get an error up there. Perfect. There we go. So now, if we run the game, our player should just disappear off the bottom of the screen. Perfect. And he's going to keep disappearing and disappearing because there's no floor to collide with. So before we go work on our world, we're going to do one more function. And this will be called handle jump. And so this will control whether or not we can jump. So we're going to say if key jump pressed, and this is one of the reasons I like to actually assign variables for my inputs because it's much quicker to write it all out. So if the key jump is pressed, so the player wants to jump, we need to see if our jumps is less than the max amount of jumps. And if so, then we can set our y velocity to equal our jump velocity. And then we say jumps plus equals 1 because we need to increment jumps to make sure we can't jump infinitely. So we go up there, handles a horizontal movement. So handle, we're going to do this, we're going to say handle movements. And then this one, move and slide, is like the actual function we have to call to commit the movement. And then handle our animation. So if we actually comment this out, nothing's going to happen because we're not actually committing. So this will change left and right because the facing variable and the handle animation function is changing, but no movement will happen because this is where we actually say okay, this is the movement we want, now actually do it. See, so now our player falls. Alrighty, so that is all the code we're actually going to need for our player controller. So now what we need to do is we actually need to get a world up and running that our player can run in. And so we're going to do that by adding a new child, and we're going to add a tile map layer. And so a tile map layer is going to need a tile map, and then it's going to need a tile set. So we're going to hit new tile set. Over here in tile sets, we're going to drag our tiles in here, hit yes, and that's going to create our tile set. And so this is this has every possible connection for non-sloped tile set, and it'll be used for auto tiling, which we will discuss in a later video. So let's give us some more room here. And so now this is a 16 by 16 tile set, so we can see that that's all set. If you have separation of margins, you can add those in. And we're just going to call this grass, because why not? So we're going to go to select. We're going to select all the tiles except for these 2 empty ones, and then so this is click and drag, and then hold shift and click and drag to add that. And we're going to go, first off, we're going to go to tile map layer, tile set. We need to come down to physics layers and hit add element. And so these 2 layers, collision mask and collision layer, we'll talk about later, but this essentially is us enabling physics, and we can have different layers to collide with different things, and that's a conversation for another day. So now what we're going to do with all these selected, we're basically just going to hit reset to default shape in our physics layer properties, and this will make them all square blocks. We can edit them, and then we can make all sorts of polygons depending on what your tiles are, but we're just using squares. So there we go, there's that. And now we can go to our tile map layer, tile map, and we can click on our tiles, and we can draw our tiles in our world. So I'm going to use this line I'm gonna draw that there. We'll make it like a gap there, like a gap there. We'll make this like a platform up here. We'll go up there. Cool. And then, this one will be right here. And we'll do the proper connections in a second, don't worry. That'll go there and there. And then we need to grab like these inner corners. And then we need to get like the wraparound edges. Nope, that's wrong. So we can erase it just like that. Perfect. And now let's build this wall right here. Make sure you deselect erase. Like selecting something else doesn't do that because you can erase in a line, a fill, a shape. So deselect erase. We're gonna go back to a line. We're gonna go up pretty tall because why not? Put a roof on it. Drag that over here. Drag this up there. Put all of our corner pieces in. That looks good. And then we can grab these three to make like a platform like that. I'm actually gonna grab these two, make that 4 long. Then we can do like another 3 platform there, 1 there, and we can do like a 1 there, and a 1 there, because actually that might be in the way, so we'll leave that one right there. And we'll do another platform up here. And then this is gonna look funky with all of this like open space, so I'm just gonna use flood fill and just put a whole lot of background empty tiles in here. And a quick way to do this is you can literally just make your outline and then just fill it. So there we go. So that's there. We have a tile map. It does have collisions. So like if we turn on our view collision shapes, then we hit play. So now we see we have the blue overlay of all of our collisions, and now we have our character. So our character will run because now we're on the ground. And if we hit jump, our character will jump and fall, and the animations are there. But we have one more issue. 1, we want to put a background in there. 2, we can't make this jump right here, so we need to fix that. And 3, our camera does not follow our player. So first things first, let's not flood fill that. Let's just fix that right there. That becomes a dirt, that becomes a dirt, that becomes a dirt. You're there, and you're there. Perfect. Now, another thing you might have seen is all of these are tiles. So like this tile right here, we can actually just remove its physics layer because the player is never actually going to collide with that. So now like if I hit play, see now we just have tile shape there. And that's actually better because that saves on rendering power. So let's turn those shapes off. The next thing we're going to do is we want to add in that background. So we're going to go to world, we're going to add a child node, and we're going to add what's called Parallax 2D. And so this is a layer that scrolls depending on like our background and whatnot. So underneath this, we're going to add this background in, and that's going to go underneath there, our background. That is not the right node, so we need to change this to a canvas. I believe it is a canvas layer. No. Texture rect, that's what we want. And so we set the texture to be our background, and we want it to tile if we stretch it. So if we grab this right here, this is our stretching. Nope, that is the wrong item we want. We want this one still, but we just want to expand it. And then we need to move our parallax up. So remember, it renders behind everything. And then we're just gonna go like that. Perfect. So now it aligns with our tile map. It's a boring background, but it allows us just to kind of have something. But you'll see now as we move, the background does not move, and our camera still doesn't move, and we'll fix the camera in a second. So if we go into the parallax settings, these numbers right here, the scroll scale, is how it moves. So a value of 1 moves like with the character, so like it won't look like it's moving at all. So I'm going to set this to 0.9, and then we're going to hit run. And it's still not going to move because we need a camera. The camera needs to move with it. So we're going to add in a camera, and adding in a camera is very easy. We're just going to add a child node, camera 2D, call it camera, and now if we run the game, we now have a camera that follows our character. And you'll notice too, see how the parallax is now working? So see how like the background looks like it shifts off center? That's what the parallax does, is it moves the background slower than this character. And we can't make that jump, so we actually need to move that down 1 more. So if we go to our tile map, we can grab these 3, we'll put it there. We had it just like that. We need to erase those. And I'm actually going to keep these 3 in here. Let's do 2 like that, so that we can actually step up all of that. Actually, I still don't know if we're going to be able to make that, because no, that's probably... Oh no, we can make that jump. Perfect. Alrighty. So there we have it. That is like the very, very basics, but we're not done there. I want to go into our camera. And so our camera has some settings. Is it enabled means like, is it actually working? Ignore rotation means ignore any like rotations that are there. We can add limits to it, but what I want to do is position smoothing. So position smoothing adds kind of a delay behind the camera, so it doesn't follow exactly with the player. So see how like the camera now shifts? It just looks like a lot cleaner, adds in a pretty cool effect of, you know, what's going on. I'm going to get rid of that one. Just adds a cool effect of like what is going on in our player. And there's a whole lot of other settings that, you know, we can add. Like rotation smoothing if you rotate it, drag, which is like how much it lags behind. And those are settings you can all read up on or just, you know, manipulate and figure out what they do. The last thing I kind of want to look at is we had these variables here. And the way we moved our character was we moved towards, remember? And we had an acceleration. I just want to show what this acceleration does. So if we make it a really small number like 4, that means it's going to take longer. So see how, so right now I press the key right now and see how long it takes us to get up to speed. And now watch this. If I jump up here and I let go right now, or I'll let go right now, see how long it takes us to slow down. So that gives kind of like a slippery effect. And like you can use that to make like ice areas, you know, like that'd be cool and whatnot. I just set it to something higher because, you know, technically we are accelerating, but it takes us 5 frames to speed up. It just smoothens out your movement and makes your movement feel a little more smooth. And the next video I make is going to be kind of like more advanced horizontal movements and how to like just, you know, smooth out some other movements so that we can start adding advanced movements into this game. The other thing that we can do really easy is we can do max jumps. So if we put 2 for max jumps, we can now double jump because our system lets us double jump. And so now with a double jump, you know, it should be much easier to navigate this whole level. And there we go. Now we're all the way up here. Hit this wall, fall all the way down. Perfect. And so that's where I'm going to leave you guys today. Things that you can do. I want you to kind of mess with these constants and see how that affects the actual, you know, system. I've built the system so that it's quite flexible. I'm sure we'll change things in the future. So like one thing I know that we can do right now is we can do jump speed equals jump velocity. And then we can come down here to our handle jump and switch that. And now that way, if we have multiple jump velocities, then it's easy to pass into a placeholder variable, just like our move speeds. Like there's one change we can do right now. Anyway, so if you like this video, please like and subscribe. I'm planning on making more about platformers and other aspects of Godot. Liking and subscribing really helps get these videos out there to aspiring game developers. Thank you again for watching, and stay tuned for the next one.